Hello and welcome back. In this lesson, we're going to continue our journey through the very basics of the Python language. We're going to learn about Python functions, Python methods, and the libraries that these functions and methods come from. So let's go ahead and get started. So as usual, we're going to go ahead and open a new Colab notebook. I have one open here, and I'm going to call this one functions underscore methods underscore libraries. And I'm going to go ahead and click this arrow at the top right to toggle the header visibility so I have a bit more space. And I've pasted in the list of learning objectives as you can see here. If you want, you can pause the video and read through these, but we're going to come back to them at the end of the video. For now, let's open a new text section and call it functions. Now let's go ahead and type a very simple definition of a function. I'll call it a reusable piece of code that performs a specific task, And I'm going to go ahead and type functions, take in inputs, and these are sometimes called arguments, and return outputs. Later in the course, we're going to teach you how to create your own functions, but in this lesson, we're just going to be using built-in functions in Python or from external libraries. So let's see an example function. The length function, len, returns the length of a given string. So I can type length maybe of the string Python. And if I press Control Enter to run this, try to guess what you think is going to return. Okay, you can see it returns the value 6. If we do length of p, you can see it returns the value of 1. So here len is the function. This string here p is the argument. And as you can see, in order to call the function, you need to wrap the argument in a pair of parentheses, as you can see there. So this is an example of a function with just one argument. Let's see a function with multiple arguments. I'm going to open a new code section, and I'm going to type the following: round. This is another function. And let's type pi, so 3.1415. And I'm going to put a comma, and then I put the number 2. So what this is going to do is it's going to round 3.1415 to 2 decimal places. Let's run that and see the output. So these are very simple examples of functions, but I think it's already time for some practice. Go ahead and do the following practice for me. I want you to use the absolute function, abs function, to get the absolute value of minus 5. I know you know the absolute value of minus 5, but practice using the abs function to obtain that. Now let's open a new text section and call it arguments. And in parentheses, we can put parameters. So arguments and parameters are almost synonyms in Python. And these are the things you put inside of the function. So let's give them a quick definition and say arguments are the values that you pass into a function. And I'm also going to write that there are multiple ways to pass these arguments. The first way to pass an argument is what we call a positional argument. And this is kind of what we did over there. So here, we just type round, and then we give our 2 arguments without specifying the name of the argument. You'll understand what I mean in a second. So let's just copy that and put it there again as an example of a positional argument. And in order to better understand what's happening here, let's look at the help for the round function. In order to pull up the help, I'm going to type round and then a question mark, and I press Control Enter. And as you can see on the right-hand side, it gives us the documentation for this function. If we look at the signature, we can see that there are 2 arguments in this function. One of those has the name of number, and the other has the name of n digits. And as you can see, number comes before n digits, so we can always assume that the first argument is the number we want to round, number, and the second argument is the number of digits that we want to round to, n digits. If we were to provide this in the opposite order, we would get an error. So let's try that. Let's go ahead and swap those. We'll put 2 first, and then we put 3.1415 second. And if you try to run this, you see we get an error. Now let's hide the error and talk about the second way of passing in arguments, and that is called keyword arguments. In the case of keyword arguments, what we do is we give the actual keywords. So here we type around number equals our pi number there, 3.1415, and then n digits equals 2. And if I press Control Enter, You see that this works. And the good thing about this way of passing in arguments is that we can change out the order. The order doesn't matter. So if I copy this now, put it in a new code chunk, and now I'm going to swap the order and put n digits first. In this case, you can see that it still works out fine. So those are the two ways you'll see arguments passed into functions. So with that, let's get you some practice on using arguments in functions. So for question 1, I want you to use positional arguments to calculate 2 to the power of 7 with the POW function. All right, so there's a function in Python called POW, and you may need to look at the help for this function to understand how to use it. And here's another practice question for you. I want you to use the round function, or let's say use keyword arguments in the round function to round the number 9.8765 to 3 decimal places. So pause the video and try that out. So next, let's talk about the counterparts to functions in Python, which are methods. So I'm going to open up a new text section and call it methods. Let's give a simple informal definition of methods. I'm going to say that methods are like functions, but they are associated with a specific object. And I will also say they are accessed with dot notation. You'll see what that is in a second. So let's open up now a new code section and think about how to use methods. So basically, most objects in Python come with some built-in methods that allow you to operate on that object. The best examples of these are with string objects. So if we take any random string, for example, let's take the string Python. I'm going to define a variable called myString equals to Python. So in a new line, I can convert this string to uppercase using the upper method. So I'm going to type my string. Okay, so I'm accessing the object or the variable there. And then I use dot notation. And from this dot notation, as you can see, once I press that, it gives me all of the different methods accessible to this particular object or variable. And in this case, I wanted to convert to upper. So I'm going to type upper. And again, I have open and close parentheses, but in this case, it's empty. It doesn't always have to be empty. And if I run this with Control Enter, you can see it gives me the uppercase Python. There are many other string methods. Let's do another one, Control C and Control V, and I will replace upper here with lower. And now you can see it has converted Python to lowercase. If I want to view all of the outputs of this cell, I need to wrap these in print. So let's do that. At the moment, I can only see the last output. So let's wrap these in print so that we can see all of the outputs of the cell. And let's see one last string method. I'm going to type print myString dot replace. And now the replace method actually has two arguments, or two mandatory arguments. The first one is the string we want to replace. In this case, let's replace the capital P here maybe. Replace capital P there with a snake emoji. So hopefully you know how to get emojis on your computer. If not, you can just put any random thing here. So now if I run this, you can see that for this last output, I've replaced the P with a snake emoji. Now, in these examples above, I pre-assigned this string into a variable, but this is not entirely necessary. So you could have something like the following. Let me copy this, open a new code section, and instead of assigning to myString, I could do the same illustrations, but just have Python dot upper, okay? myString here, replaced with Python. And you see we have the same output, so we don't have to pre-assign it to a variable there. We still get the same output. Just as string objects have methods that are accessible to them, so too other kinds of objects, for example, numeric objects. So let's see an example where we're going to define a number. Let's say methods for numeric objects. And I'm going to define an example decimal. Let's just call it example decimal. Equals to, let's say, 3.5. And one method that's accessible to this decimal is the following. Example decimal, whoops. And we type a period. And we're going to use as integer ratio. This is going to convert the decimal into a fraction. So let's put our parentheses there and run this code. And as you can see, it converts 3.5 to 7/2. So that's your rapid introduction to functions and methods. Let's try some practice now. I'm going to open a new text section and give you a practice question. This practice question will be on definitions. I want you to come up with simple, informal definitions that make sense to you for the following things that we have discussed: functions, okay, methods, and arguments, and maybe also dot notation. So pause the video and type those out. And here's another practice question for you. This one is in a code cell. I want you to do the following. Call the replace method on the string hello, okay, to replace the single L with a double L. Okay, so on the string hello with a single L, replace that with a double L. And then when you're done with that, try this other method called the split method on the string hello world. Let's capitalize the first H. To split the string the string into a list of words. Now that we've talked about methods and functions, let's go to the next topic in this lesson, and the last topic, which is going to be libraries. So libraries. So many of the functions and methods that we've been writing above are accessible in base Python. But a lot of other functionality in Python is ensconced or enclosed in specific libraries. These are sometimes libraries that come pre-installed with your computer or with your Python instance, or sometimes you have to download those libraries. So let's write a quick, simple definition of a library. We're going to say a library is a collection of pre-written code that, let's say, extends the functionality of Python. And we're going to start with a simple library, which I think you have seen in a previous lesson, which is the math library. So the math library gives you functions like, for example, sqrt to find the square root of a number. And if we try to access that function without first importing the math library, we'll get an error. So let's try this. I'm going to type sqrt and then 16. And if I try to run this, you see that it gives me a name error. It says square root is not defined. That's because square root comes from the math library. So above square root, I need to first import math. And then to access the square root function from the math library, I need to prepend sqrt with math. So math dot square root, and now I get the correct answer. Now note that usually you're going to do all of the importing you need at the very top of your script. So all of your import statements usually go close to the top of your script. But because this is a lesson, we have them kind of in the middle of the script. Now there are a few different ways to import libraries. This is the most simple way. Let's look at some other ways. I'm going to open a new code section. Instead of just typing import math, I could import math and then type the keyword as and give it an alias. So if you have a library that has a longish name, usually you're going to want to give it an alias. So in this case, I could say import math as m, and then, as m, and then instead of writing math.squareroot, I would just type m.sqrt and 16. And as you can see, this works out fine. Now, sometimes you don't want to have to give the library prefix at all. We don't want to have to type math and m. We just want to type sqrt. And in order to do this, we need to actually import the function itself from the library. And how do we do that? In a new code section, I'm going to type from math, import, and then whatever function I want. Let's say I wanted the square root function. I could do that. And now I don't have to type math.squareroot or m.squareroot. I could just type square root of 16 and run that. And we get that answer. And we can import multiple functions this way. So we could say from math, import square root, and let's also import maybe the sine function. And in addition to square root 16, I could also do sine of 16. And we see that that is that number there. And let's add a print statement since we have two outputs in this code cell, so we can see both outputs. Now the final type of import statement you may see is the following. So I open a new code cell and I type from math, import, and then star. So this imports all of the functions from the math library. So now I can just do sqrt, sqrt 16. I could do maybe cosine 16. I could do tan 16. Basically any function in the math library is now accessible to me, even without the prefix. Okay, so those are many different ways to import libraries. I'll say the most common are probably these first two. It's generally a good idea to prefix your function with the name of the library so that you don't have what are called namespace clashes. That's when you have functions that have the same name from different libraries. So this is a good way to avoid having those clashes. Okay, and now some practice for you. I'm going to start out with some text practice. Okay, so again, I want you to do some definitions. So come up with simple definitions. These are definitions that are personal to you. They don't have to be exactly correct. And I want you to define the following: library, import, and alias. So pause the video and try that out. And so for this code practice, you may have seen it before, but try it again. Import the random library and use the randint function to generate a random number between 1 and 10. So pause the video and try that out. Now for our very last topic, let's talk about installing libraries. So I'm going to open a new text section and give it a title of Installing Libraries. And to give some text explanation, let's just type not all libraries come preloaded with your Python instance. And I'm going to type again, some need to be installed. We do this with pip. And to explain what I'm talking about, let's consider a funny package or library called cowsay. So there's a package for Python called cowsay, and in theory, we could try to import it this way, import cowsay. But if I try to run it, you will see it gives us an error. It says no module named cowsay is available for this version of Python. The reason is cowsay isn't installed on this Google Colab Python instance. So in order to install it, we're going to use pip install cowsay. So pip install cowsay is what you'd normally type into your terminal if you were on a local computer. But in this Jupyter Notebook Google Colab context, we're going to put an exclamation point at the start of it. Okay, and that is sending this kind of to the terminal in Google Colab. And now if I run this, it's going to run some code and it's going to install the cowsay library. It's downloading it from the internet, installing it into this Python instance. And now if on a new line, I say import cowsay, now that import actually works. And now let's see what the cowsay package lets us do. We type cowsay.cow. And in here we can put any text. We can say, hello, Kenne. And when you run this, you'll see that we have a cow that says hello. And just so we can get some practice, remember that we could also say import cowsay as maybe C. And here we could type c.cow. And that should give us the same output. All right, now here's your final practice question for the session. Practice. I want you to, first of all, install the emoji library. So there's a library in Python called emoji. After you install it, you're going to import that library. Then consult the help function or the help file for the emojize function in emoji. So the emojize function from the emoji library. And finally, use that function to display an emoji for thumbs up. So pause the video and try that out. So that is basically our quick review of functions, methods, and libraries. Let's go over our list of learning objectives to see if you feel like you've mastered these. So by now you should have a basic understanding of what functions and methods are in Python. You should be able to identify and use arguments, which are also called parameters, in functions and methods. You both know how to call built-in functions and methods. And also you know what libraries are and how to import them and use the methods available or the functions available in those libraries. And finally, you know how to install external libraries and use those in your code. So congrats on making it to the end of this lesson. The foundations you're building in functions, methods, libraries are going to be used throughout your Python career. Hopefully you're starting to feel a bit more comfortable with this language and getting excited for the journey ahead. For now, I say bye-bye and I'll see you in the next video.